Senator Williams and I talked about this a while back, and I also talked with Representative Ford, both of whom are to my left, and then a couple other people about concerns on a few fronts, and that just kind of morphed into some other issues. The first concern that we had, and I see Representative DeWeese here, and we talked about this amongst House and Senate appropriations leaders last week, and the concerns that we have from a lot of agencies that are asking for increased demands, cost from everything, just the additional costs as it related to IT improvements, cloud computing and transfer, and looking at things like new licensing systems, new and some computers that we've actually purchased years ago, or we've given money to purchase years ago, but have not been able to implement the programs yet. So a lot of this deals, the way I look at it, is four different topics. One of them is cost, of course, because we're spending a lot of money in the state budget on the cost of computers and technology. Two is, cyber, which again we talked about this way before the UMMC incident, but that certainly brings it to ahead a little bit, or brings it in the limelight to talk about making sure that we're prepared for cyber attacks. Third thing that I see is procurement issues. I know, and Craig, you can talk about this when you get up, but I think some of the other agencies that will speak to will talk about the problems they're having with procurement, and what can we do as a legislature to make sure procurement is speedy yet safe and right, that we're getting the best product. And then I think the final thing that's a concern for a lot of us is collaboration. We sometimes have in some instances, let me say, a disjointed system of technology in our state. I think some things are collaborated fairly well, but I know even from talking to some agency heads that we have some that go down their own path. I don't know if that's good or bad, I'm not sure, but I think we need to hear as to why we don't have a better coordinated system here in Mississippi, and what we can do to make sure we're as coordinated as we could be, so our computers, to the extent that they need to be, are talking to one another across agencies, and that we have the same protections. Obviously, we don't want them to be talking so much, and if you have a cyber attack in one, it infiltrates the entire system and causes bigger problems. So I'm going to stop there because I know we've got a lot of people to present, and I'm going to ask Senator Williams and Representative Ford if they'd like to say anything, and Representative DeWeese or Representative Cockerham from Appropriations. Y'all have other comments before we get kicked off with agency directors?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know I'm going to try to yield my time to our speakers, because I think they've got a lot of content they want to share with us. But the last couple of years, Chair Ford and myself from the House have spent, we're the legislative representatives on the ITS board, and we worked lockstep with them, the leadership teams here, and they've been working very diligently to try to address all the concerns that are there. And I think, progress is being made. I think we'll get some of them unfolded in the next few minutes, but I know that the diligence and the effort is there as we go forward. With that, I'd just like to yield to have our first speaker come up.
I echo everything that Chairman Williams said, and I appreciate you, Chairman Hobson, for having this meeting and to allow ITS to speak. And I too yield my time to you, Craig.
Thank you, Chairman Hobson. I just want to say I think that you calling this meeting, this hearing, is very appropriate, very timely. Also want to commend the House and Senate chairman who've just done a phenomenal job hosting hearings all throughout the summer. So I look forward to the presentations that are going to be made this afternoon.
Okay, thank you all very much. Craig, I think you're first up from ITS, and we're hoping to keep this to about an hour. So, and that's not for you alone, Craig. We do have DFA that we expect to speak, and DHS and CPS, and I think maybe in Medicaid too. So, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the distinguished members for having me here. Let me start with, I think, 3 overarching points that I wanted to make. First is gratitude for this body. I was asked to come back to ITS in July of 2024 after doing this exact job for about 10 years. And last year in the session and this year, what you have put into play, I think, is really the groundwork, Mr. Chairman, for what y'all are talking about. And I'll talk about that. So I'm very grateful for that. There's a lot of, and I think sound and fury that happens during the session, but when you collectively look at the laws passed last session and what's in front of you this session, I think it's sort of a new day, and I'll kind of talk through that. Secondly, to my peer agencies that are here and will testify, and to the leaders and the commissioners and the executive directors, I commend their leadership. I think the projects that they will talk with you about are transformational. The projects that are in flight are transformational. I think it speaks to the difficulty that this kind of change requires, right? This is not a small lift. ITS's role in what our agencies are attempting to do is enablement, right? We want to be there. We want to be building the on-ramps. We want to be providing the services so that they can do what they need to do for the citizens of Mississippi. Third, as a starter, I wanted to kind of pick up where Chairman Hobson left off, which is sort of what it feels like inside of government from a technology perspective. We spend upwards of $400 million a year or near that on information technology. Those dollars are appropriated across different agencies in appropriations. So to give you a couple of rough metrics and talking points, 20 to 30 of our largest agencies spend 98.6% of all the dollars, right? So you have critical mass in a very short and small subset of what those entities are and who they are. But let me give you another couple of metrics. 85 and 15. 85 and 15 applies to two things. Of the total funding allocated to technology, 85% of it is allocated to agencies, 15% to ITS. From a people perspective, the numbers roughly hold. 85% of all IT positions are in agencies, 15% are to ITS. Structurally, I think that sort of helps you understand that we are a federated sort of / decentralized state. Across the 49 states, and in 2014 and 15, I had the honor of serving as the president of the National Association of State CIOs. The states are structured differently. How the reporting structure works, how the governor comes into part of that, that's a little bit of what it feels like here, the way allocated dollars are made. I say that to say this. ITS's mission is very simple, and it's really premised off a pretty famous book by Robert Ludlum called Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And that is this: sharing is good. That is our mission. Whether our mission in the past had been networks, telephony, cybersecurity, a new data center that the legislature funded and we moved into in 2011, our mission is to build things that people can share, to do two things primarily in business: increase economies of scale, using it, and decreasing cost. Okay. That is our mission in a nutshell. Let me pivot to 5 strategic initiatives that I think I'll touch on the chairman's concerns of where ITS is. These 5 strategic initiatives were put before the legislature, and coming back in the fall of 2024, I sat down with the largest agencies in government and had a conversation. And I heard a lot about the needed changes in procurement. I heard a lot of changes that were needed in innovation and how to move our state forward. That fall, we sat down with Governor Reeves and his team and put together what became Executive Order 1584 to move forward with artificial intelligence in our state. Subsequently, during the last session, there were 5 key strategic initiatives. And those initiatives I want to put before you to kind of let you know, hopefully, what the ITS of the future is all about. Initiative number 1 is cloud computing. We've had unprecedented investment in the state of Mississippi from a data center perspective, right, that houses cloud systems, including artificial intelligence. Last session, House Bill 1491 did 2 things. It created a cloud center of excellence, and it created an innovation fund. In the last year, ITS sought to look at the costs in our private cloud that is in our data center and what it may mean for us to move those systems to the public cloud. We have that, and we've presented it to the legislature. I did a 2-hour readout this morning to develop and fully implement our cloud center of excellence. So in that initiative, what you have, Mr. Chairman, is sharing. You have collaboration, right, between ITS and the agencies. You have ITS, I hope, leaning into an on-ramp to the interstate as an analogy. And we want our agencies who know their business much better than ITS ever could to use those on-ramps at scale, right? The reason companies like AWS exist and have invested in our state to the tune of many billions of dollars is that the cloud is all about sharing. The only reason AWS is one of the most profitable and profit-oriented companies on the planet is because using the cloud is a shared service. And we are attempting to replicate that for our government agencies. Secondly, has been artificial intelligence. So the governor passed an executive order, which we've moved on. The other thing is the legislature set up via Senate Bill 2426, a regulatory look, which our technology chairs have led. And in conjunction and partnership with Amazon Web Services, we have put up one of the first in the country, an innovation hub for artificial intelligence, so that our agencies could innovate and innovate in a way that brought about better government that's more cost effective. That's the key. Our third initiative from last session that has blossomed is procurement reform. In coming back to ITS, the vast majority of my initial meetings with agency heads really dealt with procurement, right? The way I would sort of characterize it, I think, is that the outcomes were typically good. Where we got to with the procurement, the contract was good, but it was exceedingly slow. Let me share what we did. We did something that ITS, in its history from 1974, it has never done before. We brought together those 30 agencies in a procurement modernization advisory council. And we sat down with those agencies and said, how do we get better together? How does ITS get better? We did a readout in October of last year, after about 8 months of work, with a vendor that we brought on board that kept us fair and neutral. We benchmarked other states where they were. We looked at the development of other instruments, including other EPLs that deal with security, our Cloud X instrument, which has nearly $25 million of business in it, to both increase thresholds, giving agencies discretion to do what they needed to do, and getting ITS out of the way to move that ball forward. Last session also on the House side, House Bill 958, which opened up all of ITS's code section, we flipped the script on that and really approached it from a procurement modernization, right? Putting master contracts in our code section, putting other elements and tools that we could use to better procurement. In many times, these code sections hadn't been touched in several decades. I'm very proud to tell you that we are at work right now and have already presented to the ITS board with the first master contract, and that hopefully that master contract will be with OpenAI. That contract will be available to every city, every county, every school, every state agency across the state of Mississippi. That's the ITS that we aspire to be as we are delivering those services. In addition, we have underinvested inside of ITS on our technology. So we have a request, Mr. Chairman, it is one of the ones you are considering, for just a little over $1 million for ITS to get better at its own internal technology to serve our agencies. One of those projects is an effort called Procuri, which is a new AI-powered chatbot to make ITS efficiency higher with respect to procurement. I'd like to talk about and pivot to the state data exchange, which came out of our Senate last year, Senate Bill 2267. Data is a strategic asset. And in the last year, from a data perspective, ITS has brought a company, a well-regarded company called the Gartner Group on board to assess what it would take for the state to do that. I should tell you, for nominal investment. For several $100,000, we're bringing that to the floor. Our procurement modernization contract that lasted 8 months was $72,000. ITS is doing this as cost effectively as we can to bring these changes forward. I say all those things, and let me add a caveat before I pivot to 2 net new things that are before the legislature. Our state data exchange required the creation of a CIO council with partner agencies. Our procurement modernization advisory committee brought 30 of the largest agencies to the table. The readout that I just saw this morning on the Cloud Center of Excellence, There were focus groups with 12 of the largest agencies that we were working with. What I hope this says is this is the ITS of the future. The ITS of the future wants to be an ITS that sits down, works with our partner agencies, builds the shared solutions, Chairman, that we need to build, and then we fully utilize them. When we fully utilize these shared systems, as an example, the conversations around our Cloud Center of Excellence, partners come to the table. Partners like AWS, partners like Microsoft, partners like Google. And when they come to the table and they see that we're rowing our canoe in a direction that is the same, they bring resources. And they bring resources to help us make these migrations happen and doing so effectively. I believe the ITS of the future is an ITS that sits down with our agency partners, as we have shown in my return for the last 20 months, and has hard conversations. Let me say this, when I travel and I talk to the other 49 states, and I think chuckles are allowed on this one, there is nothing easy about public procurement. I travel to the other 49 states and I hear it. Here's what I think the last year or so will prove. That ITS is dedicated, has sat down with agencies and had many hard conversations to move the ball. That's transformation. That transformation is a challenge, and we are tackling it. Our sister agencies are tackling very similar challenges to move the ball forward. So I think the level of effort is the same. The level of effort at ITS to make these changes is really matched with our sister agencies at the level of effort that they're bringing into the systems that they're trying to implement across government. These systems that are being implemented across government are sort of generational systems. These are systems that are replacing solutions that were built in the 1990s or earlier, right? It's not just a new solution. The platforms are different, the technologies are different, and even in the public sector, some of these changes we need to make, we have to leap to find our way. Incremental change is really not going to cut it because the technology landscape is so dramatically different. So that is the ITS that I think and we aspire to. Let me mention two net new things. The approach that you have to take, I think, is to work within the parameters that you have. And Chairman, I think you talked about this. We have two initiatives in front of the legislature this year. We have a bill that focuses on IT optimization. So I wanted to sort of start my comments with you to sort of say that the last 20 months have really brought about some relatively unprecedented legislation to move our state forward. We're bringing an optimization bill this session that attempts to formalize the way, Mr. Chairman, that we sit down with agencies and have those discussions. That we sit down with agencies and we say, we really need to collaborate on this and we don't on this. We sit down with agencies and we ponder the question, why do we have 33 different enterprise agreements with Microsoft? And if we were to do something different with that, and by the way, there's a session already scheduled next week to have that conversation, you would be looking at millions of dollars in savings. While that's common sense, and we're kind of pragmatically dealing with it, the optimization legislation isn't to create a rigid framework, but it is to create a framework that really capitalizes on the last 20 months of work, that puts us across the table with our partner agencies to be able to come to the legislature much more in unison. Okay. We're asking for a nominal amount of money. I think it's $300,000 to $500,000 just to get that off the ground. And I would commit to you that that effort will be the exact same that we've done over my 20 months back in the role. We will be sitting across the table from agencies when we do that. Secondly, as somewhat of a net new, I didn't bring a cybersecurity initiative last session because we had some ground to catch up on, the ground that I've just been covering with you. This session, we've brought a secure operations center to the legislature for consideration. Understanding how important cybersecurity is. Very much, unfortunately, the events of the last week have proven how very difficult and challenging this is. In 2017, in the role previously, the legislature passed the very first enterprise security language that was codified, and it took us a giant step forward. What we're calling this next effort is cyber maturity, beginning to take the next steps in how we need to make these maturing efforts across state government. On those two efforts that I put before you, I think it's very worth saying this one thing. We still have individual appropriations, and we still sort of do government this way. Now, in my past, I have always treaded lightly on this fact. The government structure we have produces the results that we have, okay? The point I make there is that if you really start saying things like cloud is important, artificial intelligence for the state of Mississippi is important, procurement reform is important, optimizing our technology spend across our agencies to deliver our citizens the best of services is important, and lastly, cybersecurity is important, I think what we need to do is to have that collective conversation with our agencies and talk about how and where those resources need to be allocated and how they need to be allocated in a way that is most cost effective. Here's what I know. Some of those conversations are going to render a result, which is we really need to do things very differently. Here's also what I know. There's not a chance on the planet that ITS knows much about human services, child protection services, Medicaid, building an overpass, or anything about the environment. That expertise stays exactly where it is in our agencies. They are the experts in terms of what they need. I think the magic is sitting down and having a conversation about what could or should be shared. What ends up happening, and in the readout on the Cloud Center of Excellence project this morning, is these things grow semi-organically. And when I did the readout, I saw that, right? I've already seen, not even a year since the law was signed, some growth organically that I think longer term don't make sense. Two items. One, identity. The way the state approaches identity isn't holistic and it isn't strategic. And I very much would like to change that. And part of our request this year is to do that on behalf of agencies. Two is FinOps. We need to be able to understand not just what we are consuming in the cloud, but to be able to have our agencies able to come here through an interface and say, my projected spend, Chairman, is this. So FinOps, I think, is highly important in where we're heading with cloud, the ability to really predict what that spend will be and be sure that the solutions are optimized as they should be. And I think look at where we are going and why we are going there, right? So I think that's where I wanted to sort of present in terms of where we were, addressing procurement, addressing how we internalize innovation and collaboration. I think the days of us and them need to be over, right? I think they just need to be over. I think it really needs to be, let's sit down at the table and do that. What our optimization effort does, I hope, is to take the last 20 months and say, let's do more of that. Let's sit down around the table and talk about where we're going with cloud. Let's sit down around the table and have really hard conversations about how ITS isn't meeting the bar on procurement and the things that we need to do different and the things that we are doing different, right? The bigger picture, though, is shared technology solutions and what that looks like. So some of the initiatives that the legislature has put in place over the last year were somewhat organic. I came back, I talked with a lot of these agencies, and we put this strategic agenda in front of our board, in front of our technology chairs, and we moved on that agenda. What I want to kind of do is to both say some of that was very organic. Some of that was plugged in with the other 49 states, understanding where technology is going and really having an agenda that was aspirational, not just for ITS, but for all of government from a technology perspective. But I want to distill those parts, and I want to distill out of that when you sit around across from each other, you can get a whole lot of things done. I'll tell you for a fact, consuming the procurement services at ITS, there's no doubt that it can be painful. There's no question about it. Flipping the script, and I attended those procurement modernization meetings, and being on the other side of saying, this is something ITS has never done before. We've never got in a room for 8 months and said, let's talk about where we should go. And so that's the roadmap. That is the ITS that we aspire to be. So there are other kinds of shared solutions. There are licensing solutions that we could talk about that we have in place already. There are other solutions that we could talk about to move forward on. So, Chairman, whatever the protocol is, I'd be happy to take questions or dive deeper into any topic.
Craig, I think we will stop and take questions, not right now, because I know you're the kind of the umbrella agency for technology in the state. So I do think it's a good time to stop. And the other ones we may go through individually, but I'm going to throw two at you real quickly
Yes, sir.
to address before I recognize others to ask questions. One is, if we're a decentralized state and you appear, and please don't let me put words in your mouth, if we need to get more centralized, it sounds like we do need to be more centralized than what we are. But you said there are exceptions to that. So when do we get the signal here in the legislature that, hey, this is an agency that needs to be outside of the centralization? They need to kind of do their own thing. Is that just going to be on an ad hoc basis, or can we set up a framework that it's easy for us to see which agencies need to be outside the big umbrella?
So let me answer it this way, and we can go as deep as you want. The legislation that I think we have in front of you this session, this optimization legislation, I use those words because what it really does is it does two things in the technology world. It puts forward the development of a business architecture and a technical architecture, right? With a business and a technical architecture, Mr. Chairman, you know how to opt in and opt out. An opt-in or opt-out may come from regulatory requirements. If some of our agencies have regulatory needs or issues, HIPAA, CJIS, FERPA, there may be other regulatory frameworks that do that. My sense, though, is in a cloud-oriented world, in a software as a service world, there is a lot of opportunity for sharing these resources that we build together. What's really critical that you don't see too many times in a career is we're at the beginning of a lot of things. I call it Genesis 1:1. We are at the beginning. Doing cloud right, doing artificial intelligence right, doing procurement reformation correctly, looking at how we need to mature cyber, and then that capstone of optimization. I think that is personally a fabulous agenda to move the state forward. What I think you want to hear, which I think is what we're proposing to you, that we put together last fall, met with a lot of legislators before Christmas, is optimization is about sitting down so we're much more structured in terms of how we do that.
Okay, and then the other question, I mean, I've got several on calls too, but I'm gonna open it up to other members. On the procurement issue, you're gonna hear from other agencies that have had procurement problems.
Sure.
And you mentioned that we've got a new procurement system or procurement optimization, whatever the term was. Is there anything, can that be implemented now for those that are already under the procurement process, or is it too late for them and they just have to deal with other procurement issues?
No. I don't think it's too late.
Okay, all right. Let me open it up to other members that have questions. Surely there's more questions. Senator Delano, do you have questions? Senator Williams, Representative Ford? All right, I'm going to ask you one other then, if nobody else has got a question on the cost
Yep.
issue. How do we know? We talk about this in appropriations. Each agency comes to us and says, we need this for obviously going to cloud, transferring to the cloud's a cost for each of them. And I get that. That's driven down to the agency. But there are a lot of agencies that need money for new systems. Is there anyone in your office that is verifying that this is the right system at the right cost, or is this just right now it's kind of a case by case, agency by agency basis?
So I'm going to say two things. One, the current statute requires that agencies do long-range IT plans, right? And as an example, one of our procurement types is a planned procurement. If you do an IT plan, you're on a different track for a planned procurement. A quick metric on that. The delegation limit on planned procurements was 250,000. We contemplated an increase to 500,000 and throughput increased by 52%. So we're looking at those things. I would say though, Mr. Chairman, I think the latter is more true today than not. I think agencies are making the determination of a business need that they have and how to do it. Let me loop back, if you don't mind, on cloud. So ITS runs a private cloud, right? A private cloud is just infrastructure that's in the state data center. 33 agencies are on that private cloud. The pivot we made last summer, immediately after the passage of House Bill 1491, was to look at the potential migration costs for those 33 agencies. And so the numbers that are in ITS's budget are focused on that. That's what holistic looks like. We're bringing you a holistic number. Let me also mention that that holistic number has really been grabbed by some of our public cloud providers, and there will be match dollars available premised on that. It's an $8.3 million number. We think that in some instances that match number could be a 3x match number that our partners are going to bring to the table. The reality is there is a lot of premise-based infrastructure all over government. The reason ITS mid-fall kind of said, wait a minute, we've got this private cloud. This move to the cloud could cause some confusion. And that's why we sort of collapsed the ask. So what we would really love to do is to be able to kind of kick the tires with some of these moves and migrations and bring the legislature, in essence, a set of best practices. When you move, you could expect to save X, that kind of idea.
Real quickly, I do have one other one now that you said that about the cloud.
Yep.
This has been brought up.
Yep.
Should we contract with someone like an Amazon or Google has been mentioned to handle all of that for the state? Is that a good idea, bad idea?
I think it's an idea we can talk about. Here's what I think. We already have an agreement with Amazon. We have an agreement with Microsoft, and I've made a verbal commitment to do GCP with Google. What I think is this: for ITS to scale and to provide services at an enterprise class, we will need help doing that. And I think that help is some version of a managed service. I'll give you an example. Our state network is fully consolidated. C-Spire, our in-state partner, helps us run that network. All state agencies use that network. 82% of schools use that network. There is a research network called Mission, also provided by C-Spire, that all of our universities use for high-speed research. So there are ways to accomplish what it is that you're saying.
Okay, thank you. All right. Quickly, Senator Dupree, one question. We got to hear from other presenters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One or two questions. First of all, this is a software upgrade, which I also believe includes the equipment. Is that correct? Is it just the software?
For the cloud?
Yeah.
So it's compute is how we would
Just
say it's
compute,
entered. Yes,
okay.
sir. So it's, so right now, if an agency, I'll just use the private cloud because I know that at the ITS data center. If an agency is using the private cloud, you would lift that application, assess its viability, and move it to the public cloud.
Okay.
Yes,
But
sir.
many times you're not able to do that because of the equipment that you have.
Well, I don't know if it's the equipment as much as the software, right? So we offer equipment in the private cloud for agencies to use. What ITS wouldn't really have insight into is what those systems are and what they do, what code is there. We feel pretty confident that in assessing them, you could make that migration.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator Dupree. All right, let's move on. Liz, DFA, if y'all would make a presentation.
All right, Mr. Chairman, good morning, afternoon. I'm Liz Welch. I'm the Executive Director at DFA, and the chairman asked me to just discuss a couple of points with the committee today. And the first one he asked me to talk about was the hack that DFA experienced in 2020. Oh, sorry. You know, I'm not used to this stuff. I can talk on a 30,000 foot level about that. We had to spend some significant money and time to locate what was going on with our system, and we were able to stop it. Craig was at ITS before he left, and he was able to suggest a company off of their list that we could use, and we worked with them to take care of this hack, but it was a pretty good nail biter for about 2 months. So it cost us about 1.5 million to go in and get rid of these folks. We do spend money every year with our own security systems, probably close to $1 million a year to make sure that folks do not get back in our system. I could give you lots of details, but I really can't because I'm sure the bad guys are listening to us right now. So, it was no fun, and I've never felt so helpless in my entire life to find out what was going on with us. But no personal information was taken, which we were grateful for. So, but we do keep our own software in place to try to help keep, as we call them, the bad guys out. So I definitely think Craig is on the right track by trying to help everybody get under some kind of umbrella to make sure that this doesn't happen to us again.
And what computer systems do you have under your control?
Like the state accounting, payroll, insurance, really the wheel of state government is under us.
And do you have that all under one contract, or do you have separate
Yes,
contracts for each of
we do.
those?
We do.
Kind of roughly, what are the cost increase per year that you would say for the new software? And by the way, you keep that's kept separately at DFA, correct? And that's not, how much of that is tied in with what Craig's doing, or what's?
Does something for us as well for the big network, I call it, but then we do an additional have additional software that we pay for.
And do you feel like you can on-ramp? He talked about the on-ramping of the agencies. Can you on-ramp with what he's talking about fairly effectively? Or are there things that you think you've got to keep separate?
Well, in a perfect world, we'd love to off-ramp with that, but at the end of the day, I feel like there's like a pistol on me, and if I don't do everything I possibly can to keep them out, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. So I'm sure we could work with Craig to combine all that, but you know, right now, I don't think we are there yet.
Okay, thank you. Questions before we move on to the next presenter, Senator Williams?
Just real quickly, and this may be a question for Dr. Orgeron. You mentioned you spend about $1 million a year, if I understood right, on cyber protection. If we had more of a collaborated relationship with ITS, is it possible that spend would be less?
It's always possible. It's not that we do collaborate with ITS, but to me, I just felt like we needed extra protection after what I saw.
Understood. Thank you.
Senator Delano?
I want to switch gears for a second, if you don't mind. Liz, last year we had a discussion and you helped me with some language that provided an exemption for some IT construction documents or I think it was some things that dealt with procurement as it related to IT for new buildings or build outs. And for the members here, you could have a design professional, including an electrical engineer, including IT professionals and the software companies and or hardware companies that reside within that agency, provide all their own design elements and design paperwork. But the process by state law is still currently that that the agency and or DFA have to go out to ITS for an additional review, and that just by its nature is going to take a lot more time. Can you speak to that a little bit more? I know we tried to get something done at the end of last session, and I just want to let everyone else in this room know how important that is to help expedite these construction projects.
And we're working on that again this year, and we have been in discussions with ITS, and they helped with a particular agency that's on a very tight deadline and a very slim budget. And so ITS was helpful to us to push that, the software piece that we needed and equipment piece that we needed on through.
Yes, and they were helpful last year in helping us get that drafted. It was the legislative process that prevented us from moving that across the goal line. But that is something that would definitely help with the construction projects at DFACs, correct?
That would help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Liz. We'll move on to CPS. Is Andrea here? I haven't seen her. Oh, there she is. And while Andrea,
Chairman, do you want me to talk about the payroll system?
oh, I'm sorry.
Are
Yeah,
you
if you want to cover it, I thought you were done.
This won't take but 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
As you know, we are working on a new payroll system. The payroll system is 27 years old. And so we're in the process of finally getting that system to the cloud. We work with Craig and Kelly at Personnel Board. There's a steering committee that kind of helps oversee this. And so we are taking, I think it's 2.6 million lines of code have to be refactored. We're going to take this payroll system to the cloud, because in order to go to a new payroll system, your old system has to talk to your new system. And our system is so old, they can't talk. So we're trying to get everything to the cloud so they can talk and we can get a new system. Magic is 12 years old, but it is not performing maybe like the state had hoped it would do. So we're also looking at possibly upgrading that. When we get the payroll system to the cloud, then we will assess our situation and go from there as to next steps. And we'll keep the legislature posted on what we do. So I just wanted to get that out.
Thank you, Liz. And as Andrea is coming forward, two things. One is on that issue about systems that aren't up to speed. I guess, Craig, I'm going to come back to you later on, but I know of two right now in our state where we've got systems that are implemented and they're just not as, we find out later on, one, just now getting it implemented, and we're finding out that it's already going out of style or out of compliance. And so that's an issue. I don't know if that's something we've got to get, everybody needs to go across your desk, not to guarantee that it's going to be perfect, but something to ensure that we're not wasting money on a system that's going to be antiquated by the time it gets fully implemented. And I think we talked about this looking at Representative DeWeese last week in an appropriations meeting, just very frustrating to know you've spent millions of dollars on a system and then it's outdated when you get it going, almost outdated. All right, Andrea, I know you've got issues. The other one is on procurement and money that we've got out there just taking forever to get done what we need to get done, correct?
Yes, in some ways. If it may be helpful if I just give a brief overview of the project itself. You've funded us to replace our case management system, which carries every child's story, whether or not they've had their medical appointments, dental appointments, whether they got shoes and clothes, where they are. And it's also the mechanism by which we pay for all those things. So it's a financial system as well as a case management tracking system. The state's operating in a 25-year-old system right now. I'm paraphrasing, maybe it's 22, but it's antiquated. In 2015, y'all all know that we're also in a lawsuit in the state. Olivia Y. was filed in 2004. In 2015, in preparation for renegotiating a second settlement agreement in that lawsuit, Mississippi agreed to have the people who are now the monitors for the state serve as consultants and make recommendations, create a roadmap for exit from the lawsuit. One of those recommendations was that Mississippi invest in a new CWIS compliant system. CWIS is a term used by the federal government, the Children's Bureau. And as long as it's compliant with their 65 requirements, the state enjoys a 50% match on every dollar that we spend. So Mississippi agreed in the second MSA in 2016 that we would replace the old system. There were 3 different persons sitting as the commissioner between 2016 and the end of 2020 when I took on this role. When I got there, there was a written RFP and some approvals made by the federal government. We chose to go forward with procurement, knowing it would take a long time. It did. We were able to sign a contract in the summer of 2022, and we began work shortly thereafter. The contract was bid at about $28 million. The vendor is Redmayne, and they also projected that it would take 18 months to complete. I think based on common knowledge of Mississippi's procurement practices for technology, they strategically entered the lowest bid and the shortest timeline. I am not a technology person, but I do know what it takes to build big systems and create change within systems. So 18 months never sounded realistic to me. When y'all were originally approached about funding this project, I think it was 2016, you were told it would be a $60 million project. And so the 15 million you put into capital expenditure for the agency was a first installment on that. That's my understanding. I wasn't in place at the time. We are at the tail end of this project now, and we've worked through a number of big hurdles. We think we are 13 weeks away from being able to make the decision to go live. So I've told you that many times before, but in terms of what is left to do and accomplish, the list is very short now. If you would like, I was sent some questions by someone. Do you want me to just go through and answer those directly, or would you rather ask me questions?
You can hit them real quickly.
Okay.
I know we've got 2 more presenters.
Question 1, what is left before go live? What kind of functions have to happen? Like I said, we have about 13 weeks mapped out on our schedule, during which final acceptance testing has to be completed. That's an 8-week period when our end users test the platform from front to back. And that has been postponed multiple times due to significant defects found in the system that would have created a bad end user acceptance testing experience, it's important that word doesn't get out in my agency that thing's a flop before we ever get started. So we've postponed that end user acceptance testing to work with the vendor to solve some of those problems, most of those problems, before we put it in front of the end users. We have to do end-to-end financial and accounting and data validation testing. That is a 5-week effort. We had to do a lot of work to basically migrate or merge the financial portion of the product that was built with Redmayne's portion. They are building both, but the financial portion is built on Microsoft Dynamics. And I do have a lifeline sitting over there if y'all'd like to get real technical, but I doubt it. We have to do a cutover dress rehearsal. So basically walking through everything that happens to happen with data migration. This is a flip the switch replacement system, and we need to know every possible vulnerability before we do that. We also have to have Microsoft certify the financials component and finish some end user testing. If everything goes well with all of those things, it's 13 weeks. My experience is that everything will not go well, but fewer things will go wrong than have gone wrong in the past. A realistic go live date, according to our team, is Memorial Day weekend in May. We're looking for a long weekend because it gives us a little more time when I don't have a high volume of users on the system.
Andrea, let me see if I can just shortcut this because I know we're under time crunch here. Your biggest problem were defects in the software or computer system as far as delays are concerned, or was it a procurement too? Because I know we're going to hear from DHS and I'm pretty sure they've had procurement issues, but.
Well, we didn't get started on the program and on the project until summer of 2022. We started the procurement process with a written RFP in January of 21. So
I know, but that's my point. It started in 22 and we're in 26 now, and it's taken 4 years. And I'm not being critical. I'm just helping people understand that one of the issues we have is it's taken us forever to get some of the, and I know it's a big computer system and you don't really have, this is more of a rhetorical question. What do we have to do to speed this along so we get computer systems that are in place for our agencies? We want to help here in the legislature, and I'm, again, not being critical. I know this is a difficult process, but I just want everybody to be thinking about that. How can we move it along? And maybe it's the procurement stuff that Craig talked about. That's a big part of it. But just seems like the process of getting these computers, things we funded years ago, seem like they're taking forever. And you're not alone, I promise you. You don't even need to respond to that if you don't want to, but I'm just looking for help here to get it done. So,
well, there are more important things than getting the lowest cost when you're buying technology. It's important to buy good technology, and it's also important to vet who, in some way, who has the experience. This is a technical type of product. It has to meet 65 federal requirements. And I have actually worked with the federal oversight agency, and they're going to help start putting out a list for agency heads across the country of who actually has built one of these successfully and who's doing a good job with it. I would just say procuring blindly is.
yeah, I understand. I'm not trying to be critical of you. I think it highlights the point of it just takes a while to get some of these things done. Anything else outside of that you feel like you want to say? Because I do need to move this along. Well, we can come back and have another one if we got more stuff to talk about.
We did have a number of defects. I don't think that's super unusual for a project like this. But the product that was bid was not as far along in its development as we were led to believe. So to a lot of extent, we've helped build this product for the vendor. And the other big sort of hurdle is getting data out of that old system, migrated successfully into this new system. So we're almost there on that. I do think it's sort of a cautionary tale about waiting until we have a completely broken system to try to replace it. I do think modern technology, it's moving so much faster now than when we started this project that, I think it's possible to build cheaper and faster than it used to be, but I am by no stretch a tech expert. So are there questions that I can answer for you?
Thank you. Why don't we move it along to Bob Anderson at DHS? And we had Medicaid too, and then we'll see if anybody else has any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will thank the members of these two committees. I was asked to talk to you a little bit about our Success Project, which is our huge modernization project. It's really two projects in one. It's creating a new integrated eligibility platform for our SNAP, TANF, and child care programs, and then creating a new platform for our child support program as well. So it's a huge modernization project. All of those systems are approaching 40 years old, I think, or more than 40 years old. We did the procurement in 2023. Would like to have gotten started in 24, but we had a protest that cost us a whole year and about $4.5 million in taxpayers' money. The protest was ultimately just withdrawn. I will say this about the ITS procurement process, with all due respect to Mr. Orgeron, I know they're working on making it more modern. We did not have a voice really during the protest. The procuring agency really had no voice in what was happening during the protest. We just had to sit on the sidelines and wait until it was over with. I think they're working to fix that in all, in all honesty, but that is an issue that every agency head will tell you is a problem. When the procuring agency can't be heard during a protest, that's a problem. Where are we? We are right in the middle of design, development, and implementation phase of this project. When we put out the RFP, based on all the research we did, and we did a tremendous amount of research and preparation. We put an internal team together to make sure we were ready when our design team came on board. That has kept us ahead of the timeline. But the timeline we projected in 2023 when we procured this project was about 2.5 years. We got started in January of last year, and we are projected at this time to go into what's called user acceptance testing. That's where all of our end users, our caseworkers and so forth, will work with the vendor to test the products to make sure they work. And if all pans out as it should, the integrated eligibility platform for SNAP, TANF, and childcare will go live statewide in May of next year. That's right on schedule. We're actually about a month or two ahead of the schedule in the original timeline. Child support takes a little longer. The Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement is required to certify that program before it goes live statewide. That is projected to go statewide April of 2028. But we are on track, and we are moving forward at the pace that we expected to. I had some questions about whether there have been any change orders. So far, there have been no change orders. Again, I think that's due to the fact that we had a team prepared. We call it our success team. This is a success project. That's an acronym I won't get into the details of, but we are reaping the benefits of putting our internal team together before we ever had a vendor selected. We have about 45 people in-house that work with Mark Allen is our Chief Information Officer back here. And then Maureen McDonald is our Deputy Executive Director for IT and Human Capital. And the two of them with this team are working directly with our vendor. We hope there won't be any change orders. We so far have had good, steady progress. We're moving into a phase called the organizational change management piece of this. This is going to be a whole new approach to how we do eligibility determination. And all of our staff who've used a bunch of old programs called MAVs and EFITs and JAWS and METs and CCPS, all of which have been around for 40 years, all those are gone. They're going to be gone in a year. And we will be using completely new programs. And the reason, and I think most of you know, because I came to you 3 years in a row saying, please give us the funding, please give us the funding, please give us the funding for this project. And Mr. Chairman, I think you finally told me the last year, don't keep coming over here asking for the money. We're going to give you the money to do this project. And I thank you. I thank you on behalf of Mississippians all over the state, 1,600 employees at MDHS. Our systems as they exist right now, the legacy systems, are shaky at best. We refer to them as kind of held together with, rubber bands and baling wire. Anything we change in the system today risk the whole system crashing, and it does crash on us from time to time. That's why we are replacing everything. We're going essentially, honestly, from a rotary phone to cloud computing. The comparison is there. And I want to mention this because we talk a lot about cloud-based computing and where it should be and who should be in it and all. I want to remind this body that, cloud computing is still physical-based storage. The only big difference between cloud-based computing and what we do now is that everything is on premises. When we go to cloud, the cloud is not some mystical place. It's some of these data centers that are being built right here in Mississippi, operated by Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud. What we're doing basically by going to the cloud is getting everything out of our agency space and off of those on premises machines and onto a much bigger, more nimble data center that has a lot more capability to perform all of the functions that a 21st century system needs to perform. So that's where we are with the success project, Mr. Chairman. I think I
let me
had
ask
some
one-
questions.
Yeah, one question on that. Is your computer system, once it's implemented, will it be able to talk and with, for instance, Andrea's at CPS? I mean, will they be able to coordinate to make sure and maybe Medicaid and others, are those going to be
Yes,
connected?
yes, sir. We already do that, even with the old systems, using an application programming interface. They will continue to be able to talk to each other. And actually, we have offered some of our sister agencies the opportunity to be a part of pieces of our system, like the online self-service portal. And in all honesty, when we build this new integrated eligibility platform, I think any number of agencies could share the benefit of what we built if they choose to, if they want to.
All right, thank you. Unless anybody's got any specific questions for Bob, we'll hear Medicaid real quickly and then open it up for general questions. Okay, thank you, Bob. Is
Thank you.
Cindy or somebody? There you are, Cindy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with y'all today. I have with me Jacob Black. He's one of our managers over our enterprise systems who's really on the ground with the technical pieces that can answer more questions. But I just wanted to highlight on just a few things that have already been discussed today. And so I think Craig made the comment about we're spending about $400 million a year on systems. And with Medicaid, I think we spent, $94 million this year. We're anticipated to spend $110 million next year just on the systems that we have. And so we are, 75% federally funded on most of those. CMS has a great deal of control over those. They have to certify our systems. They have monthly reviews, monthly calls on that. They're continuously tracking that. In addition, we also have security standards that they have developed that we have to run our systems through to make sure that they are protected. In the last year, we've spent a great bit of time and effort and money on making sure that all of our systems are as secure as they possibly can be, and we'll continue to work on that. I did also want to mention and give some credit to Craig. When I came into this role, it was pretty much full court press on Craig to try to get the procurement cycle working better than it has been. And he was very gracious in sitting down with us and talking through a lot of the problems that we've experienced. And from all indications of what we're seeing that they're going to move forward, it looks like it's going to really help us a lot in the procurement process. And so many thanks to Craig and his team for leading those efforts. We do collaborate a good bit with our other sister agencies, mostly on services. We have worked with CPS and the health department and several other ones, education, to try to make sure that if there's any opportunities to draw down more federal funds to offset some of those their expenses, that we can do that. We have several of those already in the work that we think is going to help lower their budget, although it's going to increase ours just a little bit more. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jacob to respond to the questions that you gave us specifically, unless you have any questions for me.
Jacob, why don't you hit it real quick, and then I'm just going to open up the committee for general questions for everybody.
I will stay as high as you want me to be or low as you want me to go. So I know a lot of you guys' questions were specifically around our Medicaid management information system. And so I want to make sure that we are speaking the same language there. We have inside of Medicaid, we have 4 enterprise systems that are really used to run the Medicaid agency. So we have our eligibility determination system, which has many integrations with human services, child protection services, and other sister agencies. We have our long-term services and support system, which handles all of our long-term care and case management, as well as claim submission from that perspective. We have our operational data store that is utilized for integrating or combining data from various silos. So this is a project that we started in December of 24. And Cindy mentioned the changes, the positive changes at ITS. We were actually able to start that procurement, sign that contract. We have implemented a provider directory API last June, a patient access API at the end of December, and we're now moving very quickly on 3 new APIs and pulling data from various backend systems to meet those aggressive compliance deadlines. And so we too had failed and lengthy procurements. And so we are seeing the positive changes that ITS is making and are very appreciative for that. All of that to say, to the system that was questioned. Our management information system, or our MMIS, is one that is provided by our fiscal agent, Gainwell Technologies. That system is live. It went live on October 1st of 2022. We are at a point now where any major defects or issues that existed in that system at go live have been addressed. It's stable. We're averaging less than 2 seconds on real-time pharmacy claims transactions every day with that system. So it is meeting the needs of the agency. But there is a component there related to meeting those continuous changes, whether those are changes that you guys enact or changes that the federal agencies at CMS or ONC have implemented as well. So I want to lay out kind of a timeline for that project so you guys kind of understand the complexity of it. So that was a procurement that was released in 2013. Vendor was selected in 2017. The contract was signed to start the implementation process. On October 1st of 2022, almost 5 years later, the system was implemented. Some of the complexity that exists there is, again, changes in federal regulations. You guys had passed legislation requiring a centralized provider credentialing process across the managed care plans. So that had to be added into that scope to complement the provider enrollment piece that was already there. And so all of those changes played into kind of the duration of that implementation, if you will. The other piece that complexity, that almost 9 years from procurement release of RFP to implementation that is before you guys this year as well, is the authority to extend that contract. So our Medicaid technical bill provides that can only be a 10-year contract with the fiscal agent. And when it takes 5 years to implement, the state makes a significant investment in a system and in operations that it does not get to utilize very long. And so being able to realize the returns on those investments are limited. And so that is before you guys this year is a request to allow us to extend that. And as we move forward, we'll kind of pivot this back to our operational data store. So we are making significant investments in improving our ability to integrate with sister state agencies, as well as to integrate and correlate data from various back-end silos to improve our analytics, to improve our program integrity, and to improve agency operations. To do that, however, we need a stable enterprise system with our fiscal agent, with our MMIS, so that we're not, I'm a Mississippi kid, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is essentially what we would have to do if we are required to replace or re-procure that system prior to October of 27, which you guys know is right around the corner. And so I'm also a fan of analogy, so I'll leave you guys with this one, related to the system and the needs there. So think of CMS as a homeowners association. The homeowners association has left you a note in your mailbox that says, hey, you need to pull your weeds, you need to put out fresh pine straw, and you need to fertilize and cut your grass. In my opinion, replacing this MMIS system that the state has made a significant investment in after only 5 years of operations would be like telling the homeowners association, you know, you can just have my house and I'll go buy another one. The system allows for real-time integrations. It allows for real-time data sharing, and we have online portals for members and providers. It is a stable system that is operating well, but there are new requirements that come out from CMS, our HOA, regularly that we have to do change requests with them, and we have a competitively procured change order rate to meet those needs. And so that is something that is before you guys this year, is the request that we be able to extend that contract. As far as the upgrades to the MMIS over the next 12 to 24 months, the primary focus on that is the implementation of a new program integrity system that will allow for improvements in identifying potential fraud, waste, and abuse in the Medicaid program, as well as a case tracking system for tracking those investigations and handling those recoupments. That is something where there's a component that we can do better in the MMIS system. The next piece of that is really improving those integrations with our operational data store so that we can use integrations with artificial intelligence to become more efficient. With our ODS for short, we've implemented that on AWS in the ITS landing zone. We've implemented our enterprise service bus or integration tech that handles that translation between the two systems in the AWS environment. And so we are moving in that direction and building those capabilities very aggressively. You guys asked, one of your other questions was about cooperative procurements, and I do want to put this before the committee. So ITS has done a fantastic job in a very short period of time of streamlining procurements. We are seeing tremendous throughput on those through the use of NASPO and GSA and other federal cooperatives. There's still room for improvement. Currently, and Craig touched on their financial operations or their FinOps in the cloud, as well as that sets the foundation for negotiations of committed spend with these cloud providers, which then also has the ability to drive down costs for the use of those cloud computing services. And so that is something that we've discussed with ITS. They are actively working on the FinOps roadmap. You guys have got some proposals before you. But they're also making significant investments in their IT infrastructure, which we've seen on our side as well with their F5, which it's network boundary and how that piece is administered. And so we bump into each other at times because they have a tremendous amount going on and we do as well. And so we're working to try to improve that collaboration and coordination to know where their timeframes land and where ours land so we can both meet the demands of the agency. But as far as to go back to the MMIS piece, we are making changes. We are making improvements. We have commitments from our fiscal agent where they are making investments and improvements without expecting payment from the state to improve their operations as well. And so that's kind of a high level of the system. I want to touch on the security piece real quick.
Yep.
Yeah. So we at Medicaid are subject to, currently it's MARS-E. It's a federal compliance standard that CMS puts out that is changing to ARC-AMP, which means very little, but we are a highly, highly regulated federal agency. So in that partnership with ITS, it's very important that while it's a shared service model, it is critical from our ability to comply with CMS that we retain the control, the configuration, and those components of our internal systems and that network to be able to meet those compliance standards, and respond to very aggressive timelines to address any vulnerabilities that may be found. So with that, I will.
Thank you, Jacob.
What?
Cindy. All right, let me start. I think Representative Ford may be first and then Senator Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really was thinking through every agency, and if you could just quickly explain how, and maybe what you just touched on, the cybersecurity aspect of it, just because that's so heavy on our minds right now. We want to make sure that we've got this covered through ITS and your own.
For that.
Agency.
So for, like, we have the two main vendors that we have, one for eligibility and one for the physical agent. And so they're responsible for a lot of their security, that they have to provide, because basically that's a website application. We also have staff and we have subcontractors, and we have recently issued another contract with a security vendor for them to be monitoring our systems. So they'll, and we've invested a lot more money on the security of that, so.
Okay, me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Appreciate y'all very much for coming. Do you know what your dollar amount of cyber spend is per year from cybersecurity?
Don't.
And it's okay. I know we're about out of time. A couple other just observations I kind of want to put out there. There may not be questions to ask now, but I challenge us all to kind of look at this. One, you spent 94 million last year, 110 million this year. Was that in collaboration with ITS? And there again, leveraging enterprise, doing those things. I know you're a very unique agency, and there are a lot of peculiarities that are very specific to you, but of that 400 million, 25% of it's with your agency. Have we done everything that we can to be as efficient as we can? And Mr. Chairman, if I might pivot back to CPS a moment ago, we had a contract, if I understood it right, we had a 16-month procurement followed by a 4-year implementation, and we're not there yet. That's 5.5 years. I challenged us to sit down and see if we had an RFP before us today, how would we approach this and try to tackle this differently? I think we all agree that we don't want procurements to take that long. That's the old way we did it. And as been noted by several agencies, ITS and the collaboration is much better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So we're obviously moving in that direction, but I think that's the challenge I'm seeing before us, these procurements. What I was hearing with CPS was that we probably didn't vet the vendor well enough. These are my words. I don't know if this is right, but I know a lot of times when we look at contracts in the state, we look at lowest and best. I think we need to invert those numbers. It needs to be best and lowest as we do that. Again, forgive me, I'm being a little rhetorical, but I think these are elements that need to be present as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There were several questions I think that you had in there as well. And so we are working, collaboratively with ITS. We had a huge server room with a lot of servers in our building, and Sillers was not equipped well enough for handling those in an emergency situation. And so I think now we've migrated out of 150 servers, we've migrated 100 over. So we have 50 left, and we've already moved those over to ITS. With that. And one other comment I did want to make, I know there's been a lot of discussions around the procurement and the needs for, and wanted to just kind of reiterate on the fact of the 80-20, for those large agencies, we have a huge IT staff, very talented people who manage our IT situations. But for the smaller agencies, they don't have that IT support staff. And so their level of need from ITS is very different from what us 4 or 5 big agencies require.
Those 100 servers that you've migrated, they reside in our state data center currently?
They've been moved over to ITS and then upgraded. They were all on-prem services.
Yes, ma'am.
for us. Mhm.
Thank you again.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Before we depart, I'm going to ask if the agency directors, Craig, if you would coordinate as much as you can while we're still in this legislative session. I know there are pieces of legislation that are still hanging out there. Help us help all of y'all make this a better system. Help us identify the areas this year. I know it's kind of late in the game, but identify the areas this year where we can make moves with general legislation or appropriations to ensure we're getting the right vehicles, the right technically sound legislation passed, and also the right spending passed, so we're not duplicating efforts and we're not too disjointed. I'm going to ask you to kind of coordinate that as much as possible, because you're the agency that should do that. Look, I thank everybody for being here. This is not a gotcha session. This is a chance to learn and help us be better and more effective overall. That includes legislators, staff, and be good for our citizens. So thank y'all for being here, and I appreciate your time. Sorry it took a long time, but this is very informative. Thanks.